Let me start with a story. A crazy idea I did with my mum when I was about 19. When I was 19, I was living in Coolaman at the time, and if you've been to Coolaman, which I know, is Val here this morning? No, Val was there the other day. Coolaman's got a set of old shops down each side of the main street, and just behind the shops there is a laneway with the houses that used to be behind the shops, which are fairly run down the times that I was living there. And it was often in these back alleys where, I don't know, it was the poorer end of town. It's where you got the very, very, very cheap rents. And I used to duck down this back alley when I'd walk home from the shops because it was the quickest way to get to my house. And one day I was walking down this back alley when I noticed that on one of the clotheslines was a very tattered flannelette sheet. And I was imagining some poor kid having to put this on their bed at night time. And so I went home and I said, "Mum, I've got a crazy idea." I said, "Can I have some flannelette sheets?" And she's going, "Why?" I go, I want to give them away. And so my mum, who's just as crazy as I am, she gave me some sheets and I packaged them up and I went back to this home, snuck into their backyard and pegged the sheet to the clothesline. Seriously, I'm not making this up. I'm sneaking flannelette sheets into somebody's backyard. When I told my dad the story later that night, he said, "It's probably just the dog blanket." But a few weeks later, I saw the sheet. I was walking down the back alley again, and I saw the sheet washed and on the line. And it just, made my heart really excited. But the best part of this story actually happened the day after I snuck into the backyard. I was at uni at the time, and I was sitting with a bunch of my friends from Year 12 at the cafeteria. And one asked, "What did you do over the weekend?" I was telling them this story of how I smuggled a sheet into the backyard because I didn't want this poor kid to sleep on a tattered sheet. There was this girl who was there from my school who was not a Christian, who could not believe what I had done. She's going, "Why would you even do that?" She just couldn't get her head around what I had done. About 8 years later, I ran into that same girl again. She goes, "You know what? Every now and again, I still think of you sneaking the sheet into the backyard." She says, "I still think about that." There's something impacting when we decide to reach out beyond ourselves, whether that will be an act of care or an act of sharing the love of God in words. In the lead up to Pentecost, we've been looking at a few of these key values that we have as a church, the values that shape our decision making and our directions. And so far, we have looked at things like worship, having a heart for worship, having a heart for serving, having a heart for caring. And today, I want to put the fourth one on there, having a heart for mission. This doesn't complete the picture. I think there's more than these four. They're just the four that we've looked at in this series. And I would say that over the 120 years that we have been a faith community of both here at Trinity and St Margaret's and combined together as Tuck, we have always had a real, it's something that drives us, a heart for sharing the love of God in words and actions and wanting to make a difference in our world. And in the Bible reading that we had today, Jesus turned to his disciples and he sort of said, I've been doing this. My earthly ministry has been about reaching out to people and sharing the good news with them. And now I hand it over to you. Now it's your turn. Now you need to continue my mission. And this is the mission of God. And that's part of what we as a church have our heart for, to be participants and supporters of that mission. Robert Snace is the Methodist bishop who put together the 5 fruitful practices of churches. Do you remember me talking about that at one point? Things like radical hospitality, I can't even remember, passionate worship. Yeah, he actually made this quote one time in one of the conferences I heard him speak at, when he said, when churches maintain primarily an inward focus or turn inward using all their resources for their own survival, or for their own people, then their spiritual vitality wanes, he said. But he said conversely, he said when churches work to make a positive difference in the life of others outside the church and look beyond themselves, there's something life-giving when a community does that. I don't know, would you agree with that? When a community begins to look inwards, the spirituality struggles. But when we look outwards, something is life-giving about that. And this can happen on so many different levels, as Edwina picked up beautifully in her kids' talk. It can be happening in our own backyards. It can be happening at the edges of Turramurra. It can be happening to the ends of the earth. And we as a church have always had that heart for supporting and resourcing people who are doing that, whether it's been overseas missionaries or regional missionaries. I've never told this story before, but when I was at Bible college at UTC, when was that, 21 years ago, I heard about TUC. I heard about Turramurra Church. Do you know the thing that we were talking about? The different things that the students, when we sit around and talk about other churches, do you know what we were talking about TUC? We had heard a rumour that TUC gave over $100,000 a year to missionaries and other missionary endeavours beyond itself. Is that actually true? It is, when you include the flea market. That's how you were doing it. And that's what we had heard. We're just sitting there going, what? A church gives away $100,000 a year beyond itself? That's what you were known for in the college. And you were still doing that right up to the point of when, if we include the flea market stuff that we give away beyond ourselves and the stuff that we're doing to support our local missionaries, we're still close to doing $100,000 a year in 2019. Last year, without the flea market, I don't think we got anywhere near that. But yes, that's what we were talking about. So I had heard about this church because of your generosity in supporting people who are doing mission, whether that's regional or overseas mission. It's always been a strong part of the community that we've had here. Over the past 3 years, we've been supporting 3 different missionaries. Although in the last 12 months, do you know who our missionaries are that we support financially? I'm way behind in my slides here. Here we go. The Bickertons, the Blairs and the Richards. Although in the last 12 months, David and Catherine Richards, who've been working with WEC in Western Sydney, and previously before that 10 years in Bulgaria, they finished up halfway through last year. And I am quite disappointed in myself that I didn't quite pick that up in the middle of COVID and everything, because we really should have acknowledged that in a big way when that happened. And so I'm doing that now, that these people who have given so generously over many years of their life, and we've supported them for many times, David and Catherine, they moved on to some other things. They're still working in Western Sydney. They're still doing their English classes and art classes that they were doing, but they have sort of stepped back from that missionary work with WEC last year. So we do thank them for their service and pray God's hand to be upon them in their next era of their life. But we continue to support the Bickertons in Melbourne and the Blairs who are working with Logos, and I actually asked them to give us a brief update of how they're going. And because of their generosity, I said 2 minutes each, and they gave me 4 minutes each. They're just generous people. And so I've got some updates for them. Would you like to hear them speak right now? We've got to play some videos.
Hi everyone, my name is Grant Bickerton, and I, with my wife Catherine, we serve as missionaries with Power to Change. The heartbeat of Power to Change is that everybody would know somebody who truly follows Jesus. And we seek to see that happen by connecting people to Jesus, then building them up in their own faith, and then training them and to be sent so that they can also have the vision and the skills to see other people come to faith and follow Jesus as well. We've had a long history of doing that on Australian university campuses, as well as a keen interest in overseas work as well. But over the years, we have seen people struggle in ministry And as we saw that more and more, we felt God leading us to move from our direct on-campus roles to actually serving in a way where we can integrate my psychological background and training and multiply ourselves to enable other people to minister themselves in a healthy and sustainable way. God gave us an image of being like in the back of a shipping trawler that was smashing through the waves at night in a storm. And all around the edge of the boat, there were people in the water going down. Our passion was to be helping those at the side of the boat to pull others in. But we also noticed that after a while, those who were pulling others in themselves were becoming exhausted and falling back in the water also. Our vision is to multiply ourselves by assisting people on the boat, so to speak, to be developed and healthy to serve others for the long term as we stand by side, seeking to minister to other people who are in the water. To do that, our ministry really has three key foci. Firstly, we want to be helping Power to Change missionaries and other Christian workers not only just go okay in ministry, but enable them to thrive. An example of how we do that is actually this week I'm leading a new missionary orientation course to help new missionaries have the skills and the training to enter ministry well, because actually that doesn't always happen. Secondly, we also are seeking to engage people, gospel workers, who are struggling. For example, at the moment, one of our cross-cultural workers in the Middle East, he contracted COVID-19 in November last year, but sadly he's developed long COVID and is very unwell. His wife is okay, she doesn't have COVID herself, but she's struggling caring for not only her husband, but their 18-month-old infant, as well as being 6 months pregnant. They feel isolated, they're in a difficult place. So part of my role is to come alongside and care for them and others who experience difficulties in their ministry context. But then thirdly, we also are seeking to keep on being involved in direct ministry, and that's a real joy. So coming up in early July, I'm actually speaking at a conference for Christian and non-Christian university students across Victoria around the theme of what are you living for? I want to say thank you, Turramurra Uniting, for actually being our spiritual home for our family. And you have and continue to shape our experience of God. So I want to say thank you for that. As Paul prays for the Philippians, it's very true for us. We thank God every time we remember you. In all of our prayers for you, we always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel with us. From the first day, in fact, even the first day I became a Christian at Turramurra Uniting, all the way until now. God bless.
Hi, Turramurra Uniting. Yeah, I just want to give a quick update on OM Ships and us as a family. Speaking of family, here they are.
Hello!
So COVID has certainly affected how OM Ships has been operating over these last 12 months. But we've seen God's hand and leading in all sorts of ways as we navigate through this new kind of landscape for the ministry. So for the last 6 months, most of my time has been focused on planning for the annual dry docking and then helping to manage that dry docking remotely from here in Newcastle. This whole dry docking hasn't been the easiest one to organise, with all the restrictions in place and difficulties with getting various people to the ship and contractors and equipment and logistics. But thankfully, the ship did get into a dry dock in the middle of April in Curacao and into a shipyard there. And we're still in there at the moment, but we're coming towards the end of that month or so period. And by and large, things have gone really well, actually. They had some steel work that took place, placing some parts in the hull, had to cut a hole in the hull and to replace some of that steel. There was some work taking place on one of the generators, which has also gone well. Like every year, plenty of tanks needed to be cleaned. Yeah, also just yearly routine maintenance throughout the vessel, which then allows us to be certified for another 12 months. So once the dry dock is finished and complete and we have our certificates for another 12 months, where will the ship go next? Well, as I mentioned before, we have really seen God's hand leading us in new ways over these last 12 months. One of the things that happened was just prior going into dry dock, we had been on a voyage, on our way visiting St. Vincent, another island there in the Caribbean. And on our way there, a volcano in that country erupted. You may or may not have heard that on the news a few weeks back. But that volcano erupting, devastated a large part of the island. So when, just as we arrived and the volcano had just gone off, we were actually then in a position to help the country there with some of the immediate needs. The ship has, fresh water makers on board, and we're actually able to supply 100,000 litres of water in the 3 days that we were there. And we were also able to help with some other immediate needs. We had 250 of these blue buckets, which are a little bit magic. You put dirty water in them and then clean, fresh, drinkable water comes out the bottom of them. So we're able to give them away and all sorts of other immediate need supplies. So this is something we weren't expecting to take place in that short visit. Certainly was something that we were, I guess you could say, in the right place at the right time. And so this is something we now want to get back as soon as possible, back to St. Vincent, to continue helping out there. The needs are still really great there. The volcano continues to erupt and cause problems and issues. And so, we're really excited and looking forward to the opportunities that has opened up in this way, that we can help with some of those physical needs in the country there as we are able to shine a light into the community and help just be, I guess, God's hand and feet. So none of this is possible without God's church, God's people. Really want to thank all of you, for each one of you, for your role in missions, because it is God's mission and we are all part of it. Just really thank you as a church and as individuals for being a part of God's mission.
Was that helpful? It's good to get an update, and it's important to see the passion that this church has had for resourcing people in mission has been really important and makes a difference. It does make a difference. As both Grant and Matt affirmed in that video, we are all called to be part of this mission, both to resource mission and to participate mission. Jesus, when he passed the baton on, said, we will all be doing this. And if we feel like this is a lot, Jesus says, I'll give you some help at the same time. But when Jesus says, I want you to be my witnesses, the Greek word for witness in that passage that we had is matus, something like that. Which is actually has got two meanings. It's not only somebody who has seen something and therefore passes it on, so says, well, I've experienced this and I'm telling you about it. It's also somebody who follows the example of. So when Jesus says, I want you to be my witnesses, Jesus is just saying, I want you to do what I've been doing, to follow my example, to continue this work of love and reconciliation. Now, we've looked at some people who are doing, this full-time ministry like Grant and Matt, and sometimes think, that's beyond us. We can't do that sort of stuff. So I've also invited Marg to come and to share a little bit of her story of something which is, not full-time, but still significant and impacting upon people. So do you want to have this microphone? I've got this microphone.
You ask my question.
I have to ask the questions. Are we able to knock off the main slide there? Do you know how to do that? Oh, look at that. It's done. Yeah. All right. So we're talking about Kairos ministry here. So what is Kairos ministry?
KPM, or the Kairos Prison Ministry, began in the US, and in 1999 it came to Australia. It's a ministry of Christian women and men from all churches and denominations who seek to respond to Jesus' call to serve those who are in prison, as well as those on the outside who are sorely impacted by their incarceration. We dearly want to help make a difference in their lives, to model Christ's unconditional love, to share our experiences of God's forgiveness and acceptance, and to build a community of love and support around them.
Sounds great, but how are you actually doing that? What are you organised to make this happen?
On the one hand, teams are formed to organise and conduct programs in both the men's and women's prisons, and this is called the Kairos Inside Group. In our arm of the ministry, called Kairos Outside for Women, KOW, we also form teams who twice a year offer to women impacted by having a friend or a loved one in jail a free weekend away. At these weekends, women or guests are showered with many blessings. Perhaps the most impactful of these is the opportunity to meet and share their stories with the women on our team who themselves have struggled with similar issues resulting from having a relative or friend in prison. These precious women comprise about half of the 28 members of our team. They also give talks on such topics as isolation and rejection, self-worth, and when their loved ones come home. We offer our guests a safe, open and supportive environment where they can be listened to in complete confidence. We offer them the freedom to be themselves with no strings attached. Our forgiveness ceremonies have changed many lives, including ours on the team. Our motto is listen, listen, love, love.
So we've been talking about how we're a church who wants to participate and support in mission. So how can we be involved, or how can we support you when you're being involved?
Well, our answer will always be firstly prayer. Just yesterday, Marg Williams and I attended our last training day for the next weekend, KOW 43, which is to be held at the Mount Shonset Spirituality Centre at Mulgoa, the weekend after next. Yesterday, we were encouraged to ask our church friends for prayer for the weekend, and especially for the 14 women who are to be our guests. I do have a copy here of a way of putting your name down on a prayer roster that covers in half-hourly spaces the whole weekend. With Kairos being an international organisation, Christians from all over the world will be praying. Another way of supporting KOW is to refer to us and us to any whom you might know who need a weekend such as we offer. Or you might like to volunteer to join future teams for this precious ministry. As you leave, we would love you to take an invitation to the two occasions. Some of you may have it in your hand. In the two occasions during our weekend when members of the outside Christian community come to Mulgoa and help our guests see their prayers and supporters. Financially, we work with extra money the teams pay, if they can, to help cover the cost of the free weekend offered to our guests. Churches we belong to offer donations. This congregation has a long history of supporting the Kairos ministry through donations from both private donors and from the flea market, as you mentioned. And talking about long histories with Kairos, I must share with you about the generous volunteering of many members of this church who have joined Kairos teams. Did you know that Rob and Marg Williams have been very active members of Kairos from KOW number 1 in 1999? We are now up to KOW 43. Rick Johnson and Rob have served in the youth arm of Kairos for many years. Andrew Alder and others have also served. Nerily Cutting and I have been more recent recruits. But another surprise for you who remember Liz and Vern and remember Liz and the Harvey family is that the very loved and generous Vern Harvey is now the chairperson of KPM Australia.
We thank you for your sharing, Marg, and we do pray for you and for Marg as you head off onto KOW 43. And when's that on? Can we put that slide back on for the people who are here? Yeah, so they're the two events that are on the thing.
Yes.
So if you're watching this online, we can't actually give you a piece of paper, but I'll post that on the Facebook group afterwards. But they're the two events that people can support you by actually coming along on that weekend.
And also, I have a way of joining the prayer vigil if you'd like to slot yourself in.
Yeah.
We especially need people about 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So if you lie awake those times of night, then a good half hour could be spent praying for us.
Thank you so much for sharing. I really do love hearing stories of people who have found a way that they can be participants in the mission of God. And I think that we can all tell stories because we're all called to be part of the mission of God. Having a heart of mission should be something that drives our own decision making, but it should also be something that drives our church. So this idea of looking beyond ourselves should be something that not only we do, but the church does. And I wrote this line in my sermon, having a heart for mission should shape our church budgets and direct our programs and activities as well. It really should be a huge part of who we are. And I believe it has been and will continue to be. Bishop Snate, who I quoted earlier in his book, asks this confronting question. He says, what have we done in the last 6 months that has made a positive difference in the lives of others that we would not have done if it was not for our relationship to Christ? Can you see what they're saying? What have we done as followers of Jesus in the last 6 months that has made a positive difference in the lives of others that we're only doing because we are followers of Jesus? Part of the Acts 1 reading that is encouraging for us is that Jesus just doesn't dump this sort of question upon us and say, where are you going to be my witnesses? Jesus also offers to help us. And in the verse 4 and 5, it says, don't leave Jerusalem for the gift my Father has promised, but wait for the gift my Father has promised, which you have heard about, the promise of the Holy Spirit, of which we are going to celebrate next week in Pentecost. Now, I've obviously tried to pack too much into my sermon here, and I've still got a little bit more to say, but I made the decision lying in bed last night, you know what, I'm going to cut the sermon here and then push the rest off into Pentecost because it flows together. That's why I was doing it. When I was writing, I'm going, I have to go on and talk about how the Holy Spirit actually empowers us to do the mission that God is calling us to do. But I'm going to press pause here and let the voices of Marg and for Matt and Grant be the significant voices of this talk instead. And tonight we've got the young people playing that role tonight and will be the significant voices sharing there. But if you want to hear what I was going to talk about, come next week. I'll include it at the first part of my sermon. We're going to pause there, but I just continue to encourage you to be open to the calling of God for all of us to participate and support God's mission. We're going to reflect upon that as we sing our next song.